The biting wind howled, a mournful dirge across the barren expanse of the Montana Badlands, each gust a physical blow against Alara's thin shawl. Her lungs burned with the cold, raw and aching, mirroring the terror that seized her heart. For 3 days, she had scoured this desolate landscape, following the faint, hopeful scent of wood smoke, clutching the tattered blanket her son, Caleb, had left behind. He was small for 6 years, quick and curious, but no match for the unforgiving winter that had descended with the sudden fury of a wild beast. Despair, a frigid hand, squeezed her throat, threatening to choke off her last breath of hope. The sun, a pale, indifferent orb, dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows that danced with her growing panic. She stumbled, her worn boots sinking into the crust of frozen earth, tears blurring her vision, turning the stark world into a watercolor of gray and white. "Caleb," she whispered, a desperate prayer against the wind's deafening roar. "Please, my boy, please." Then, through the swirling snow, a faint silhouette emerged, a rough-hewn cabin, hunkered low against the land, chimney exhaling a thin plume of gray smoke. Her heart leaped, then plunged. No child would build such a place. Yet, a desperate, illogical hope propelled her forward. As she drew closer, a figure emerged from the cabin's shadow, a man tall and broad, his back to her, silhouetted against the deepening twilight. He was kneeling, his posture one of quiet intensity. As Alara's frozen fingers pushed open the sagging gate, the man shifted, and she saw him clearly. He was a rancher, by the look of his worn leather and calloused hands, a stranger with eyes the color of a winter sky, holding her son. Caleb was small, far too still, nestled against the man's chest, a thin blanket drawn up to his chin. His usually rosy cheeks were ashen, his lips a faint blue. A small, ragged breath escaped him, then another, shallow and strained. Alara's world fractured. A guttural cry tore from her throat, raw and animalistic, as she stumbled forward, collapsing beside them in the snow. "Caleb!" she choked out, her voice ragged. The rancher, his face etched with a quiet, grim understanding, met her gaze. There was no pity, no judgment, only a deep, weary sorrow that mirrored her own. He gently shifted Caleb into her trembling arms. The boy's skin was cold, far too cold, and his eyes, when they fluttered open for one agonizing moment, were clouded, seeing something beyond her. He tried to smile, a faint, fleeting movement of his pale lips. "Mama," he whispered, his voice a wisp of wind, and then, with a soft sigh that was barely there, he was gone. Alara screamed, a primal sound that tore through the desolate quiet, echoing off the distant, indifferent peaks. She clutched her son's lifeless body, rocking him, a desperate, futile attempt to breathe life back into his small frame. The rancher, Cale, watched her, his expression unchanging, a silent sentinel in her personal apocalypse. He did not offer empty platitudes, nor did he shrink from her grief. He simply existed, a quiet, solid presence against the backdrop of her unbearable loss. A man who had held her son in his final moments, a silent witness to a mother's greatest agony. The bitter wind whipped around them, a chilling reminder of the world's indifference, but Cale remained, his gaze steady, his silence a strange, unexpected comfort in the face of such profound despair. Cale did not leave her to her solitary grief, though she wished for the world to swallow her whole. When her cries eventually faded into hoarse sobs, and her body, racked by the cold and sorrow, threatened to give way, he moved with a quiet purpose that bordered on reverence. Without a word, he took Caleb from her arms, wrapped him carefully in a clean, coarse blanket, and carried him into the small cabin. Alara, numb and broken, followed, her legs moving mechanically. Inside, a fire crackled in a stone hearth, its warmth a sharp contrast to the freezing world outside, yet she felt no comfort. Cale laid Caleb gently on a makeshift cot, then returned to her, his gaze unwavering. He handed her a steaming mug of something hot and bitter, a medicinal tea, perhaps, and a thick wool blanket. "Drink," he rumbled, his voice low and gravelly, the first words she had heard him speak. His eyes, though assessing, held no malice, only a quiet resolve. He moved to the small table, sharpened a shovel, and began to speak of frozen earth, of the difficulty of digging, of a quiet place near a stand of pines where the wind might be kinder. He spoke not to her, but as if to the air, practical details that pierced through the haze of her grief, demanding her attention. That night he dug, and she watched. Through the cabin window, she saw him, a solitary figure under the pale light of a sliver moon, his breath pluming in the frigid air, the metallic scrape of the shovel against the unyielding ground. He did not ask her for help, nor did he offer to leave her alone. He simply performed the arduous task, a silent, weighty act of compassion that transcended words. When he returned, dusted with earth and weary, he did not look at her, but stoked the fire, his movements economical and strong. He was a man of the land, shaped by its harshness, accustomed to its solitude. Alara, adrift in her sorrow, found a strange anchor in his silent, unwavering presence. She knew the whispers about Cale in the nearest town, Redemption Bluff, a reclusive rancher, a man who kept to himself. Some called him strange, others wild. A few even hinted at darker things, though no one could ever name a specific misdeed. He was simply an outsider, a man too comfortable with the vast, empty spaces that unnerved others. Now she was an outsider too, perhaps even more so. A woman alone, a mother who had lost her only child to the unforgiving wild. She had left what little she had in the decaying settlement of Hope's End, her husband long gone, seeking fortune that never materialized, her small farm failing. Redemption Bluff was her last, desperate hope, but she had arrived too late with too little. Now she had nothing, save for the profound emptiness where her son had been, and the perplexing, silent company of this stranger. Days bled into a frozen blur. Cale did not send her away. He did not question her past, nor did he offer sympathy. He simply continued his life, a stoic rhythm of chores, and by his unspoken example, he pulled her back from the precipice of utter despair. He cooked simple, hearty meals, stew thick with wild game and roots, coarse bread. He mended a broken latch, chopped wood, checked on his small herd of longhorns. He worked without complaint and without expecting gratitude. Alara, initially a silent, inert shadow, found herself slowly, almost unconsciously, drawn into his practical world. She watched him, studying his movements, the quiet competence in his hands, the way his gaze swept the horizon, keenly aware of the subtle shifts in weather, the distant movements of animals. He was a survivor, pure and simple, and in his quiet strength, a fragile seed of something unnameable began to stir within her. The town of Redemption Bluff, miles away, would surely have heard by now. A lone woman, a dead child, found at Cale's remote ranch. She could almost hear the judgmental whispers, the clucking tongues, the pity turning to suspicion. But here, in the small, warm cabin, there was only the steady breathing of Cale as he slept, the crackle of the fire, and the vast, indifferent silence of the land. It was a silence that, for the first time in many years, did not feel entirely empty. The cold, relentless grip of winter tightened its hold, forcing an intimacy upon Alara and Cale that neither had sought, yet both silently acknowledged. Days were a stark repetition of survival. Cale hunting, repairing, tending to the few head of cattle that dotted his property. Alara, slowly, almost imperceptibly, shedding her shroud of utter numbness. She began to help. First, by simply keeping the fire stoked, then by kneading dough for bread, by mending Cale's worn shirts with clumsy, still trembling fingers. She observed him, learning the unspoken language of his routines. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He always left a portion of the hot water from the kettle for her to wash, always ensured the warmest spot by the hearth was clear. He never pried, never offered advice, simply allowed her to exist, to heal at her own glacial pace. This quiet acceptance was a balm on her raw spirit, something she hadn't realized she craved until she received it. She learned his habits. His early rising, the way he'd pause at the window before stepping out, his deep respect for the land and its creatures. The town's rumors about Cale being aloof, even strange, seemed less like truth and more like the fearful speculation of those who could not comprehend solitude. Yet, the world beyond the cabin walls was not so benign. News of Alara's presence at Cale's ranch had filtered back to Redemption Bluff, distorting with each telling. The town's pity for her morphed into suspicion, then condemnation. Cale was already an outcast, his independence seen as an affront to communal order. Now, having a woman, a bereaved mother no less, living under his roof, only fueled the gossip and righteous indignation. Deacon Thorne, a self-appointed moral compass for the town, a man whose piety masked a cruel, grasping nature, began to stir the pot. He saw an opportunity. Cale's land was fertile, bordering the river, a prime target for expansion. And Alara, a woman with no family, no standing, was a convenient tool. One frigid afternoon, a wagon approached the ranch, cutting tracks through the fresh snow. Thorne was on the buckboard, flanked by two other stern-faced men from town, their expressions grim and disapproving. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Cale stepped out of the cabin, a silent, imposing figure, his hands pushed into his pockets, his gaze steady as he watched them approach. Alara, her heart pounding, stood just inside the doorway, clutching the rough-spun shawl tighter around her. "Cale," Thorne called out, his voice booming across the frosty air. "We've come about the woman." And the child, the way he said, "the woman," made it sound like an accusation. "It's not proper, Cale," one of the other men added, his eyes darting to Alara, then quickly away. "Living out here, unchaperoned. The town is concerned for her. And for your reputation." Thorne fixed Cale with a sanctimonious glare. "We understand the unfortunate circumstances of the boy, but the town has offered to take Alara in, provide her a place, a proper widow's care. It's not right for her to stay here, Cale." "There's talk." Cale's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his gaze unwavering. It was Alara who felt a surge of unexpected defiance. The grief that had consumed her had given way to something harder, a steel forged in the fire of loss. These men, with their pious pronouncements and thinly veiled judgments, represented the very cruelty she had escaped. They offered care that would undoubtedly come with a heavy price tag of control and conformity. She stepped out, standing beside Cale, her posture straighter than it had been in months. "I am not an object to be passed around," she stated, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "And this man, Cale, gave my son dignity in death when the world had forgotten him in life." Her words hung in the cold air, unexpected. Thorne's expression flickered, surprised by her temerity. The other men shifted uneasily. The unspoken accusation in her words was clear. While the town had left her and Caleb to fend for themselves, this solitary rancher had offered solace. The confrontation had solidified something within her, a realization that her fragile trust in Cale had deepened into a quiet alliance. This isolated cabin, once a place of despair, had become a refuge, and Cale, its silent guardian, her unlikely protector. Deacon Thorne, emboldened by his perceived moral high ground and the silent assent of the townsfolk gathered behind him, pushed forward. "Alara, we understand your grief, but your judgment is clouded. This man, Cale, is an unsuitable guardian. His ways are unconventional. The town council has decided it is for your own good that you return to Redemption Bluff. We will make arrangements for your welfare." His gaze swept towards Cale's cabin, a possessive glint in his eyes. The implication was clear. If she left, Cale's hold on his remote property might become precarious. This wasn't just about her welfare. It was about control, about land. Alara felt Cale subtly shift beside her, his body language a silent challenge, his eyes fixed on Thorne. He said nothing, allowing her to bear the weight of their words. It was her fight now, too. The cold wind bit at her exposed hands, but a different kind of heat coursed through her veins, the heat of a righteous anger she hadn't known she possessed. She had lost everything, But she would not lose her dignity, nor would she betray the quiet compassion Cale had shown her. She took a step forward, placing herself squarely between Thorn and the cabin. "My welfare, Deacon Thorn," she stated, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the bluster, "is precisely what brought me to this man's door." While your concern remained distant and unspoken, Cale gave my son a burial, and he offered me shelter when I had nowhere to turn. Her gaze swept over the faces of the townsfolk, some curious, some disapproving, all judgmental. "You speak of propriety, of concern. Yet, when Caleb and I struggled, when we faced the harshness of winter alone, where were your offers then?" Thorn's face flushed. "That is beside the point, Elara. This is about what is right, what is decent." "Decency?" Elara cut him off, her voice rising, imbued with a power that startled even herself. "Decency is not found in idle gossip or in judging a man who lives simply and honestly. Decency is found in kindness, in helping those in need, without expectation of reward or the payment of your particular brand of virtue." She turned slightly, gesturing towards Cale, who remained stoic, a silent pillar of strength beside her. "This man, whom you ostracize and malign, showed more humanity in the face of my despair than this entire town could muster. He did not ask for my story, he did not judge my circumstances. He simply acted." Her voice rang with an unexpected authority, carrying across the crisp, cold air. "I choose to remain here. This is my home now. My son rests here, and I will not leave him. Nor will I abandon the only person who has shown me true kindness." A hush fell over the assembled group. The men shifted uneasily, their self-righteous confidence wavering under the force of Elara's raw, unvarnished truth. Thorn, for all his bluster, was visibly stunned. He had expected a broken, grateful woman easily manipulated. He found, instead, a woman forged anew by grief and a quiet resilience, standing defiant and strong. He stammered, unable to find a retort, his eyes flicking between Elara's resolute face and Cale's unreadable, stoic expression. The unified front they presented, an unspoken alliance against the world's judgment, was unassailable. Finally, defeated, Thorn mumbled something incoherent about misguided decisions and turned away, clambering back into his wagon. The other men followed, their faces a mix of embarrassment and lingering resentment. The wagon slowly turned, its wheels crunching in the snow, and began the long journey back to Redemption Bluff. Elara watched them go, her chest heaving slightly, the adrenaline slowly receding. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so had claimed her own strength. She turned to Cale, who met her gaze, a flicker of something akin to quiet pride in his eyes. He offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of profound respect that needed no words. The afternoon light softened, painting the distant peaks in hues of purple and gold. The ranch, once a lonely outpost, felt like a sanctuary, a testament to resilience forged in shared hardship. Elara, the crying mother, had found her dying son, and in the ashes of her despair, with the quiet help of a misunderstood rancher, she had found her own voice, and with it, a strength that would leave the judgmental town stunned, a testament to dignity that could not be taken, only earned. They stood together, two solitary figures against the vast, indifferent landscape, bound not by vows, but by an unspoken understanding, a shared silence, and the quiet, enduring hope that blossoms even in the harshest of winters.